Hey guys, welcome back to the Marketing Grind. This is a marketing podcast where we explore the daily grind of B2B marketing from inside the trenches, talking about what's working, what's not, and why it all matters. As always, I'm joined here by my brother Gary. What's going on today, man? How are you?
I'm doing good. Glad to be here, and I just want to comment. You're you really have the B2B thing down. Like you got a really fast B2B. You say
B2B.
B2B, yeah, real close. I'm more of
Okay.
like a B2B or B2C, and you've got this like you say it all day, every day. So I like it. You're a pro.
It's the world I live in. So, if it doesn't roll off the tongue fast, then I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, I like it.
Cool, man. Well, got a really awesome topic. This one's actually been on the list for quite some time. I've seen it lurking there. I'm glad we're bringing it to the surface here today. It's all about zero-click content. But before we get into that, this is a show that's fueled by caffeine, right? So before we get into zero-click content, whether you've heard about it or not, whether you know what it is, um, we got to get into the coffee. So, Gary, what are you drinking for this episode?
Another cold brew once again. It's my afternoon dose of caffeine gonna last me through to the evening here. We are just talking. We should probably do these things in the morning when coffee's a more appropriate beverage. But yeah, a high impact dose of caffeine here in the 4:30 p.m. hour. This is another roast from Atlas Coffee. This month's country is Colombia, and it looks delicious. I'll save the tasting notes for after a cheers. But fill me in. What do you got this week?
Well, before I get into it, we got to get Atlas to sponsor this
Yeah,
podcast.
seriously.
Um, so I went back to Singing Sun, which is a coffee shop in Ventura. Got the zinger, but I got it on ice this time. So a
Oh,
few
nice.
episodes back, I got it hot. Right, it was kind of a chilly day. This time I got it on ice,
Break
and
down the zinger again.
yeah. So the zinger is it's like an espresso based drink, milk, espresso, but it's got cinnamon. It's got like a little vanilla, I believe. But the kicker is the cayenne pepper. So it's kind of like this sweet and spice and everything nice, all rolled up into one. So you really get like that. You get the espresso and like the sweetness up front, and then you kind of get kicked in the back of the tongue with a little cayenne pepper, which makes it a very interesting drink. Makes it very tasty. I enjoy it, obviously. Um, so yeah, don't be adverse to throwing some cayenne pepper in your coffee. It'll it'll get you off to a good start.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. All right, well, let's give it a whirl. I want to see the reaction that you have when you get that first blast in the mouth of cayenne. So, crowbars up.
All right, cheers. Hmm. Iced, it's very subdued. It's there, but when it's hot, it kicks you a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Um, Not to say this is bad. It's kind of warm out, so that's why I went the ice route. Um, Still really good, but yeah, if it's I guess maybe they just like maybe the cap fell off when I got it last time, and like the bunch of cayenne pepper fell in. But no, yeah, it was definitely much hotter last time, but still good. What about yours?
It's delicious. Last time for last episode, it was like extra bold. This one's just like right in the middle. It's just right. I've been reading Goldilocks a lot lately and using the "it's just right" analogy. Yeah, it's nice and chocolatey, like any extra dark roast bean will bring to the table. But it's got like a really nice kind of nutty almond thing going on with like just a little layer of like marshmallow fluff. It's nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
think like
that's
Rocky
interesting.
Road, but in coffee form with just a just a little fraction of the sweetness. Like this isn't sweet like ice cream, obviously, but those flavors are kind of layered in there in a very nice way. So
So does
good
that mean
stuff from
there's a
Atlas.
nuttiness to it?
There's a little nuttiness to it, and then there's like, like I said, the marshmallow fluff kind of it's got a creaminess to it that's pretty good. So yeah, really nice coffee.
Awesome. And and I was just thinking when you mentioned like, oh yeah, we should do this in the mornings because of the coffee stuff. Um, you know what? You're gonna need that coffee to get you through the next couple hours with the kids, putting them to bed and everything. So
Yeah.
maybe this does work out after all.
It does work out for me. Yeah, 4 p.m. coffee's definitely it's a normal thing in my world.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, yeah, let's get right into it. I tease it a little bit. You know me, little Mr. Tease. Zero click content. This is something that actually like has been around for quite some time, but really, like I think that at least in my experience, anyways, like only really heard that term coined by Amanda Natividad from Sparktoro,
Yeah.
maybe a couple years ago. And she's put out a bunch of content, has been on some podcasts talking about zero click content. But we've seen companies like Google, like with search and everything, like really leaning into this. You don't need to click somewhere to get the information that you're aiming to get. And even social platforms like LinkedIn are sort of like penalizing posts if you have a link that's going outside of their platform. So why don't you break it down for us, in the simplest way possible? What the is zero click content?
Brad, bleep it out. Just kidding. Zero click content. Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's like, it's totally obvious, but in another way, it's like, what does this really mean? Like, what do you actually do? So, zero click content essentially from a marketer and content marketer perspective is taking the mindset of delivering value in the place where the user or the reader is consuming the content itself and not layering in additional necessary actions in order for them to extract the core value from that content. That's really kind of the gist of it. And so on the surface, got it. Simple, easy. But in practice, it actually requires a pretty significant shift in kind of mindset and kind of tactics and strategy. And I've been recently kind of going through those motions and taking it to heart and taking it to a whole new level. And it's been interesting to kind of have to unlearn some of the habits that you learn from a classic digital marketing
Yeah,
perspective. If
I
you've
was
been
gonna say
practicing digital
this.
marketing for 10 plus years, there's a lot of stuff that's in conflict with zero click content. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Like I was gonna say, this goes against like everything that like I have, I ever did. In the last 10 years of marketing is, tease the content, sure, break things up into micro content, but we're really trying to promote this larger piece.
Right.
Um, that's still in play here, but it's doing it in a very different way. Instead of like almost teasing, you're giving like the juice like up front
Yeah.
and doing so in a way where like you're building better trust with with your audience at the end of the day. So it is, as you said, yeah, unlearning like a lot of like the best practices of digital marketing that um, that we used for so long.
That we rely on, that like a lot of the kind of foundational best practices of digital marketing kind of rely. So it really kind of flies in the face of that. So it's been really interesting experience over the last, I'd say the last month has been like a lot of it. And it's super uncomfortable. And yeah, it's fun though too. So what I think is interesting when I think about zero click content, and I think about what are the kind of tropes that you and I kind of hit on week after week when we have these discussions, and what have been some of the themes that have been layered into our personal kind of take on digital marketing and where it's been aligned over the years. Like zero click, I feel like at its essence is a practice in empathy for marketers. You are literally removing the thing that you want the most, them to click, them to give up information, them to consume where you want them to consume. And you are literally kind of leaning into what is best for them. And when I was thinking about this, I was like, holy shit, this is Gary Vee's jab, 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 right hook, like in practice. It's giving, it's giving, it's giving, it's giving. And what it's missing is the right hook in a way. But that's where the nuance comes in, because you can't ignore the right hook. You kind of alluded to that. Like you can't just ignore that, but you do approach it in a different way. But I just thought that was interesting because you and I were really coming into kind of peak digital marketing form while that book was being released and promoted. And so that was like a big concept for us. So I think like zero click is just, it feels like it's kind of in our roots already. Just requires subtle shift, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Gary Vee obviously ahead of his time and all these and this mentality, but it really comes down to investing in like the consumer or the customer, with this upfront value,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that right hook it comes in different ways. It instead of it being maybe the ask, it's more of just dropping, hey, if you want to dive deeper, here's where you can do that. Like, here's the actual thing I want you to click on. Like, the click is additive to all of this, right? Like, at the end of the day, with these
Yeah.
platform, like being platform native and platform focused, give the value within that experience. And there's still opportunity to sort of drop in like the larger piece, after you've sort of gained some trust and you've primed the audience to be ready for that. I think growing up in digital marketing over the years was, you know, as I mentioned, like the T's, but like there's always the end goal of like the CTA. Like, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
Let's get them to download this ebook or visit the longer form blog posts. But we haven't earned that trust yet. We haven't given enough value up front to be able to demand that. So, um, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about that, like that mindset shift. Like how do we, as like classically trained digital marketers that are really relying on a lot of KPIs, metrics, data, website traffic, etc. What does that really mean when you need to really switch that mindset um, to think more about zero click?
Yeah. Cause what it is it's not jab, 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 right hook. It's jab, 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 breadcrumbs. You know, it's like, let me lead you to where you could go for information, give, and make it easy for them to make the decision on their own to go the extra step and not force them to do it, and sometimes not even ask them to do it. So you have to balance that, obviously. But in my mind, the phrase goes, instead of asking them to do something, earn their motivation to do it, earn their desire to want to engage with you deeper in that way. Um, Instead of call to action, optimize for influence, optimize for that kind of that mind share that you want to take up in that audience's brain. Optimize for that. Action will follow, but you can't put one over the other. You know, you can't skip steps. So optimize for influence, optimize for engagement over clicks, right? Like this is really apparent right now. We're in this at the agency across several clients right now, rolling out some brand new LinkedIn ad campaigns, and I'm relatively new to that particular platform. This is my first time really kind of getting hands on with it, and I took a zero click mindset to the program that I've developed. And as we're going in and building ads there, I'm realizing how maybe different this way of thinking is compared to traditional marketing and what LinkedIn ads was built for, which is direct response advertising. Like you can't go in and build an ad in the platform, like a direct sponsored content ad, without adding a URL, without selecting a call to action. Like you have to build it as a, I'm trying to get you from this feed to wherever I want you to go. And I was just like, man, my strategy like didn't account for that. Like I was like, I don't want the 1200 by 628 thumbnail image with the URL. I want a 12, 18, a 1080 by 1080 square image, or a 1080 by 1350 portrait that looks like a native post, that looks like you don't need to go anywhere. Everything you need is going to be delivered right here. I want that subconsciously, the first thing people think and see when they're scrolling and come across this ad, that it's not just another right hook. So that was like an interesting moment where we were forced to kind of pivot. And I know you can like post it organically and then kind of run that as an ad. And so that's probably what we'll end up doing in the future. But we were trying to run a bunch of like dark posts that weren't in the kind of organic feed, and was realizing like, damn, LinkedIn just doesn't offer that. And I know like my background is in Meta, and you can do stuff like that in Meta. And I thought that like maybe you could do that in LinkedIn, and you just can't. So that's like, I think, an example of, you know, this mindset shift and how different it really is, that you have to think differently in how you're kind of approaching the channel. Like and to kind of dig into the LinkedIn strategy a little bit more, like all these ads that I'm putting out there, I don't care if they click. I don't want them to click. I want them to see it. I want them to hover a little bit. Maybe not even stop the scroll, slow down the scroll. You know, I'm down for that. I want to get them to click see more. I want to get them to play the video and watch 4 seconds. I want to get them to like it. Comment would be awesome, but I'm not even really asking for that. I think that's like, you know, phase 5 with some of these brands that I'm working with, where like you need to earn that a little bit more over time. But let's deploy a layer of content that delivers value in the feed and retarget based on the activity that we're getting in the feed. That's kind of the concept behind this, and that we layer on additional ad units based on that engagement, and then so on and so forth. Like that next layer, we're optimizing for maybe slightly more engagement than we were before in a shorter time period, and then we layer on ads after that. And at the bottom of the funnel, the bottom layer of this entire kind of like ad hierarchy is a bottom funnel, is the right hook. And that is where we're trying to get you to click off and go book a demo, book a consult. But it is after earning, it is after making it, showing them, delivering so much value, and showing up so much over time that they're almost glad to see that there is an easy way for them to go, yes, like I do want to take that next step. Like we're only showing those ads to people who are like really likely to feel that way in that moment. Because so much of the time you're presenting those type of like bottom funnel CTA ads to people that are like way earlier in the life cycle, and it's going to cost you a lot to get those clicks. And will they be qualified once they hit the page? And even if they go through with like booking a demo or whatever your action actually is, will they actually be qualified, or are they going to sit in your pipeline for like 24 months and then dwindle out if you don't have the like most aggressive, precise nurture sequence ready to go for them? So that's kind of an example of like zero click in action in a channel where most people are not thinking zero click.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that respect, I mean, you really need to invest a lot in your content. I mean, it needs to be strong, compelling, you know, whether it's like, you know, a really strong opinion or some sort of rant, something that gets like the audience thinking and relating to like to that point of view. Um, and yeah, and it's almost like you want them to be the ones that are exploring the website on their own and digging more into your company, or let's say if it's somebody at the company that's doing it on their personal account, um, doing more research into like this person, and then ultimately it's like, all right, I'm on board with whatever's going on here. Yeah, let me book that demo. Let me dig in a little bit more, because I think like what zero click allows companies and employees at the company to do is to really like really go all in on the problem. And if you really want to connect it to like the solution that your company provides, it's really going all in on that problem, ranting about that problem, really getting into the mindset of like of your audience. But it also makes me think about like, when it comes to content as a whole with zero click is you're not just thinking about the buyer persona. Like when we talk about audience, we're not just talking about the people that are like going to buy your solution, right? Because that's always like that's the old mindset was get them
Right.
to click the CTA, get them to book a demo, get them to do this, get them into sales, right? With audience, it connects a little bit more with brand, so it's like kind of really connected to the brand strategy as a whole as well. And so maybe we can dig into that a little bit. Brand and performance marketing. Performance marketing, they've got certain KPIs they need to hit. Um, and certain tactics that go along with that. Zero click, in my mind, because it's so long term focused, is more of like a really a brand play. What do you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the different perspective that I kind of bring to the table, basically because, you know, we operate with this like full funnel perspective and we're not really living in on the brand side or on the performance side. We're kind of living across both of those sides. Is that a lot of times you'll have a content team that is like maybe deploying some of this like zero click strategy. And then you have the growth or demand gen or performance team that is running the kind of like more traditional playbook, or maybe, well, let's say the modern playbook, which still isn't zero click content, but maybe is like the webinar white paper strategy. And you don't have them really in sync, and so they're on the performance side, they're not able to capitalize on the learnings that you are getting on the brand side, and that whole like layered retargeting thing, like they're not able to kind of fully connect that stuff in the middle. And so you have these kind of two different strategies at play that like really aren't benefiting from either side. So you have this content team that is lacking the kind of business metrics, the revenue influence that they need to justify kind of their long-term viability. And then you have demand just like working with the most miserable conversion and click-through rates. And just you're seeing maybe trickle down connection and impact from these things, but they're not like totally lockstep in sync. So that's where I think, you know, got to have those two things kind of playing together. And if those two teams aren't talking really well, and if you are working with agencies and you have an agency for performance and you have an agency for brand, then you might be in trouble because um, you're not capitalizing on all of the benefits that you could and should be in today's kind of modern age. You know, like even in channels like search, where it is such a kind of high intent bottom funnel or mid funnel channel, um, like you should be retargeting those visitors in social. And you should understand that what campaigns are driving people to which landing pages to know how you want to retarget. What is that follow up messaging that you're going to show in the LinkedIn feed? It gets pretty, you know, complex. It can get pretty complex and sophisticated if you really want it to be. And I think in this day and age, to really capitalize on kind of both ends, you should be thinking that way, even if it's simplistic and not like 1,000 ads running at once. That even if you had kind of like 3 ads running in one channel and 3 ads in another, knowing how they talk to each other and complement each other is key.
Yeah, and I think on the subject of LinkedIn specifically, because I think we see this a lot in today's day and age. Like I don't really see much of this happening like in Meta, aside from like maybe Instagram with Reels, and even on TikTok, you can produce standalone, insightful videos that you don't need to click off and learn more. You can get everything you need right in that video. But with LinkedIn, as you mentioned, ads, like I've wanted to try this and haven't yet, but thought leader ads with
Hmm.
LinkedIn, where you're getting your CEO or, subject matter expert to put out something. Granted, they have a good, network on LinkedIn, putting out a very, you know, simple, maybe it's taking a blog post, the 2,000 word blog post, and you're taking having them write, or you can write it 150 to 200 word LinkedIn post that's almost like a summary or a branch of the idea, and you're running ads against that. And there's no CTA to go anywhere else. It's just that's the post, and you can
Hmm.
consume it right there in the platform. Have you guys thought about trying that out, or
I'm
Ivy?
very interested
Yeah,
in going in trying that out. It's we're not doing it yet, um, but it is definitely part of like my phase two planning. Is how do we tap into some of the sales leaders or execs on the client side and empower them. Well, my first plan is to see who's already organically like active and saying interesting things and see
yeah,
if there's an opportunity there. But the next like the 2A to that or 2B to that is supplying them with the content, letting them rewrite in their own voice if they want to, and then utilizing that as the ad unit. Because yeah, you're right. Like I don't think you can run those as like website traffic objectives. Like I think those are single image um,
I
sponsored
mean, I would
content
just run.
posts.
Yeah, I would just run it as like a text post.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, oh yeah, you could do that too. Yeah. You know what I've seen that's actually pretty innovative is taking a screenshot of the post and running it as and not
As an
running it as a
image.
thought leader, but just
Yeah,
like taking a screenshot of the thought leader's post. I
I've
thought that
seen
was
that.
a
Yeah.
pretty interesting little angle to take on it.
Yeah, you can try both. I mean, I think that's like, that's more like maybe like a little hack of sorts.
Hmm.
But it'd be interesting to see like you run the thought leader and that against like or together and just see like which one performs better.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I've seen that, and the ones that I have seen looked engagement wise seem to perform pretty well. Um, and so we talked about like performance marketing and the brand, and sort of the balance between the two. What kind of gets me was zero click, and I think this is more for like getting the buy-in to like experiment and do these sorts of things, is like the metrics, right? Because I think especially if you're at a company and you're pitching this thing like, yeah, we're going to just try like putting out content, zero click. We're not trying to drive traffic back to the website with this particular thing. How are we really measuring this stuff? I think as marketers, like we're just like natural, you know, experimenters, and we just like at a lot of times you just need to try stuff and see what happens. Um, but the higher ups always want to kind of see the numbers and see like the impact, like why spend time here? What is that doing for the business? Um, so it kind of got me thinking about like how do you measure the zero click content? And I think social metrics is obvious, likes, comments, engagement overall, right? Are you getting more followers, because of this stuff? But it's really a leap of faith at the end of the day. I feel like, because you're really looking at this like long term success. And we talked about like eventually, like yeah, like maybe the website traffic will come and the clicks will come eventually if the audience is primed enough and they trust what you're putting out. But what else is there? Like, what other sort of like measurement or KPIs falls into the zero click, or maybe there's nothing else.
No, I mean you're right in that it all kind of lives in like the leading indicator type of world versus kind of like the downstream uh, business metric world, and that yeah, I think leap of faith is an interesting way to put it. It's not how I typically think about it, because in order to even start talking about this type of strategy, I think there's an element of like understanding, like stated understanding that needs to be had, that is like, this program is going to optimize for quality over quantity. And you can't really start down this road unless you and your executive team are all on that same page, because you have to understand that there becomes a downshift in velocity when you move to this route. Um, but yeah, some of the tracking, and from a tracking perspective, it is like some of those leading indicators, like impressions and engagement, are like a big thing of what I measure. I'm typically measuring them at a kind of channel level, but then rolling that up into like a broader level. Like how is this impacting across the entire kind of marketing ecosystem that we're playing within, from uh, paid search, paid social, to website traffic. Those are like the main areas where I'm looking at that. Another channel that we've we haven't really talked about is email, and I think that's another interesting area where like, what do you optimize for in email if you're going zero click? Obviously, open rate becomes a much more compelling metric, without the reliance on kind of click through and click rate. But I think reply rate becomes a really fascinating metric, and it's one that I'm actually currently, like just yesterday, I was talking with my team about, in HubSpot, being able to kind of set up the inbox in a way where it's capturing replies, and it's able to see like when someone is clicking the reply button, it's going connecting back into HubSpot, because that becomes a really interesting thing. Um, Another thing that we're experimenting with on the email front um, is polls and surveys. Obviously that does require a click, but it's not like the CTA type of click where it's like, in order to engage with this, you need to click off. It's actually like it's asking you to engage within the email, and yeah, it'll take you out in order to kind of register in whatever platform you're utilizing. But I think that's an interesting thing, is like seeing just like the participation in like polls and surveys within the email platform. Um, and what we're really kind of moving more and more into is like various like content driven email workflows, drip sequences, learning tracks, things like that, where we're taking some of the content we're producing for the blog or the resource center, and we're repurposing in a way that makes sense for email, where it's like the 7-day learning track to XYZ. And we're keeping it short, we're keeping it punchy, way more conversational and personal in the email inbox, and requiring absolutely zero click. I mean, you obviously need them to click something to get enrolled into that sequence, but like the value's being delivered right there. So it's just another kind of like angle. I mean, that's not new, right? Like that's like tried and true, but you typically wouldn't think about it in that way. You're thinking about it, how can I get them to email number 5 so I can get them to click that button? Well, you know what? I don't want to get them to do anything after email number 5 other than feel like a positive uh, afterglow of this interaction with my brand, and the willingness to open up another email or to engage with us on social or whatever. Like that's all I'm optimizing for. Zero click, positive feelings. It's like feel good marketing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense. And we were doing this at Rentsbury when I was over there. I didn't even really know. I mean, I didn't really know what zero click content was back then. But our email nurture sequences were essentially taking our blog content, and we were creating these very robust emails that was really pulling out like the the real value out of that blog. And we would always link back, not with a button, but it'd be like a hyperlink and very low
Mm-hmm.
key. Um, but when we were putting these things together and adding new ones to the sequence. I never really thought anything about like like what happens at the end of this, like what, just kind of a best practice in my mind, and what happens to them after they're done with, in the sequence, and so maybe without even knowing it, we were deploying this like zero click content mentality. um yeah, but I'd have no, and that goes back to the metrics, right? Like we had a really strong open rate, and I think that was probably our biggest signal. um but yeah, we weren't even really thinking about it, so I couldn't tell you like this was a success. um we just thought it was the
Yeah,
best
I
way to
think
do it.
what's interesting is like small marketing teams. Um, you're probably like a pendulum bouncing from one side to the other, like unknowingly doing zero click content because you don't have the resources and like fully fleshed out strategy and team to like close the loop on some of the like marketing programs that you're putting out there, and then maybe in other channels and in other areas, not having the luxury of like really building something big and full funnel and just going like, well, we have a webinar, like we need to get people into it, so like we need a push, and so you're probably like way more on one side or the other most times than like firmly in the middle. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I mean, like that whole thing wasn't super connected to like a traditional sort of like sales team either.
Right.
Like in most cases, like people opening up those nurture emails and going through that process, we're able to sort of take those signals and let sales know like, hey, this prospect is pretty warm. Um, yeah, the experience at Rent Spree, we didn't have like an SDR BDR team. Everything was operated by our customer success team, and webinars that we ran were for specific types of association, real estate associations, and clients. And so we weren't inviting like everybody into these things. It was like only if you're a member of Miami Realtors, that's who we're going to market this to.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, we probably could have done a whole lot more with the data that we were getting from like our nurture sequences, connecting that to our different customers and prospective agents that were within these associations, to provide stronger support, for sales activity. But yeah, small marketing team, you can only do so much.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I get it. I get it. It's hard to think about all that stuff. And then when you're like, all right, well, we're going to forget the call to action here. And I mean, it's not really that. It's actually the opposite. Like, we're intentionally thinking about the call to action in such a deep way that we actually don't need to place it in message number one or message number two or in the first third of this, email or whatever. Like, let's elongate. And so, yeah, it requires kind of like a pretty deep level of thought in order to get there.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of counterintuitive in a way, right? Where like you think, yeah, I gotta promote this thing right now instead of no, like we're we are promoting this thing, but we're doing it in such a different way and in a more native way to each platform that we're putting this thing out on. Whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be like an X Twitter thread, where you're like putting
Mm-hmm.
out like four separate tweets out, to kind of be like your whole, to kind of round out your thought or your opinion, your idea, and then you get people engaged with that. Um, it just sent. I mean, those engagement signals are so strong because then it tells you like, hey, I'm onto something here. Maybe I should create something bigger about this. Um, I think it's just a good idea generator too. Like even if you don't have this thoughtfully baked out, you can test your opinions and your thoughts and your insights, doing the zero click way. And if you
Yeah,
see this thing taking off from an engagement standpoint, now you're onto something.
that's a great point. And I think that, from an in house perspective, you have a little bit more, that's more of an opportunity on an in house side versus agency where we're
Yeah,
like,
totally.
we're connected to deliverables that need to remain somewhat hefty, at least in the moment, to like perceive value. But there is a world in the future where we do lead with kind of smaller, scrappier, leaner ideation and production value, and use that to guide kind of our higher, deeper production pieces. And yeah, we've thought a little bit about that, and I haven't taken it all the way to like as small as like a LinkedIn thread, or I mean, an X Twitter thread, or a LinkedIn post, but it could absolutely go there, and that would be an interesting exercise, and most definitely a significant shift in our current process and workflows. But it's something I'm interested in because you definitely. I mentioned this earlier. Going through this process is kind of nerve wracking. It's uncomfortable for me because it flies in the face of best practice in a lot of cases. And you just don't know if it's going to work. That leap of faith comment that you mentioned is like ringing in the back of my head since you said it. Um, you're kind of taking it a leap of faith yourself. Like, oh, is this where I'm doubling down on this strategy, and I think it's going to work. I do feel very convicted in it, so I'm not like doubting myself. But um, the question in my brain is like, we're in a moment right now where this seems to be the right thing to do, but could things shift in the future? Could we go back to more of like a direct response environment where some of these platforms, whether they exist today or not, um, make us optimize more for action instead of influence? I think that'll be an interesting thing to measure. Like as things like AI disrupt search, like what does that mean for the future? How do ads play into an AI experience um, compared to like search? And what is the next social platform that we tap into from a B2B standpoint that might prefer short, punchy, kind of like direct response style ads in favor of, once marketers kind of flood the LinkedIn feed with zero click content, does it push the consumer out and away in a way that we're not intending to? But as you know, marketers ruin everything. So as this concept catches on, could it backfire in the future? And it very well could. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, we do ruin everything. And yeah, like my LinkedIn feed is just filled with zero click shit. So I'm actually like when I like see someone's post that I tend to open up, like the full post, and it's like you get the see more button, and I click it, and it's just like one more line. I'm like, oh, that was nice, kind of a short and sweet, you know, piece of value versus like I have to read like this, maybe 6 paragraph long, short paragraphs, but like, a long thread or a long post.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little experimenting that goes on there too. But yeah, I think that's what we do is it's experimenting, see what happens. Um, I do think we're going to ruin it for LinkedIn at some point. Maybe that's where X will come back into play a little bit more.
Maybe.
Yeah, but the video, it continues to be a huge medium as well. So I consume a bunch of business related content, on Reels. So maybe we see a lot more of that too.
Yeah, you definitely could. I think my kind of closing point in kind of thinking about what's next and where do we need to go is that in B2B environments, first party data is still going to be king. Like this is the most important thing that you can have because, our last episode was all about pipeline, right? Like you don't have pipeline unless you have first party data. So you need, if you're going to take the elongated view of marketing and take them from the highest level the most lowest intent, highest level of interest, to being qualified enough to potentially engage with a sales rep. You need to be able to identify who they are and market to them and personalize things over time. And ultimately, like, zero click means zero first party data. So you eventually need to get the click. And we have to, that's a delicate balance. Like, you still need to optimize for getting someone motivated to do what you need them to do. I think that's an important point for us to hammer home at the end of all this, because we spent a lot of time talking about how the click doesn't matter. It actually matters a whole hell of a lot. We're just changing the way that you think about getting them there, and you earn that motivation. You don't ask for it.
Well, I mean, yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Um, and as a marketer, I've been adverse to, like, with forms on the website, especially when you're booking a demo. Let's try to uh, create less friction as possible. But the one question I always like to ask in those types of forums is like, where'd you hear about us, type of thing, and having like social or LinkedIn, or maybe it's a free form, whatever it is, or free text field. But that's another way to sort of combat the, well, yeah, they came in through LinkedIn. They didn't come through a specific ad, right? Like, where we can like put UTMs on it, and we can sort of track it that way. They just decided to come to the site after consuming all this great content. We've built trust. We've earned that trust, and now they want to book a demo. But that's one way you can sort of try to attach that attribution to the zero click strategy. It's just to ask, where are you
Mm-hmm.
coming from?
Yeah, yeah. The attribution element, the all important attribution. This is probably a different episode. Like, attribution in and of itself probably needs like its own 30 minutes. But I think also the concept, and I don't know if you saw this pop in your LinkedIn feed, but I was doing some LinkedIn comments yesterday on the concept of this like owned media movement. You follow the Audience Plus guys and kind of this like
Yeah,
whole create your series and
should have been at golden hour.
yeah, I know. But yeah, I think that whole movement's really interesting, and there's a ton to unpack there because there's a lot of overlap with like my philosophy. And ultimately, what we're talking about is like attribution, and their model like requires that it's basically built on exclusive subscriber content. And that's so fascinating to me. Like, I don't know the longevity what of that concept, but I'm really interested. It's like it's taking the gated model and it's like turning it into something that's a little more approachable for today. Um, but you got to do it right, because you need to build audience while at the same time converting them, which means getting them to click. So it kind of comes back to like the zero click concept again. Build audience using zero click content, and then earn that motivation to say, I do want to watch the full hour long with the bloopers or whatever, like whatever stuff some of these brands are doing these days. It's really, there's some wacky stuff out there in B2B right
Yeah,
now.
I mean, and it all
Um,
comes back down to like just investing more in the customer. Give them
yeah,
what they want. And then they're going to keep coming back.
absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it.
Boom, mic drop. That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's such a fascinating concept, and one I think will just be a part of marketing teams, strategies, and tactics going forward. At least it should be in the conversation. Um, but yeah, good topic. I'm glad that you brought this one to the table.
Is there anything top of mind as we're talking about this? Like, I have this thing coming up and I might want to tweak how we do it this time to be more zero click? Like, is there anything, are the wheels turning in your kind of workload planning head of like, how do you want to do something more zero click in the future? Or are you doing something that feels like really in that zone?
No. Like we're not doing anything in that zone, but like what it gets me thinking about is, we produce so much webinar content, and and we're like in the last few months, like taking the actions of like transcribing all that stuff, turning that into written content. um, I've sort of played around on LinkedIn, like the company page LinkedIn, a little bit more up from a promotional standpoint, but like this sort of gets me thinking, like, like let me do less pushing to like the big video. Let's take a concept that was discussed in good detail, and that's just a post. That's just a text post or something like that. um, so as I was sort of thinking about this topic, and sort of thinking about some of the talking points, that's when I started thinking, I was like, like I've been doing things like the old way. Like I know this is sort of the future for now anyways. Like I should be doing this stuff, and I'm not. So yeah, like I need to go to the drawing board a little bit and be like, all right, what are we producing from a content standpoint? How can we elevate it, make it better, but also how can we um, get into that zero click mindset a little bit more, and take the things we're already doing and sort of convert that to that zero click activity. So yeah, I
Here's
mean,
the
things
thing that kind
definitely
of
pop
came to
up.
my mind is that in order for this to be in a place where like it works for you, you need to have, from a marketing perspective, you need to have at bats. Like if you're only publishing a handful of times a month, you don't have the luxury to like remove the link or remove the watch the full webinar here. You kind of have to do it. But if you increase your output by like 5x, then you have way more at bats and you can hit singles and doubles and wait for that home run. So I think an exercise that I was just thinking about recently with this podcast in particular, I posted something this morning, and after I posted it, I was like, oh, I didn't put like there's a new episode of the Marketing Grind. You can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcast. And I was like, maybe I don't need to. Like, and obviously this isn't for a business, so like I don't have business metrics to be withholden to, but like or beholden to. But I thought like think about some of the brands or creators that you follow, and there's people like, and I'll just use Hormozy as an example because everyone knows him. But like Alex Hormozy, you know who he is, right? You see his content.
I don't know,
He's like the
actually.
muscle guy who's all over Instagram with like entrepreneur quotes. He's like a sales guy. No, you don't know
Oh
him.
yeah.
He's
I
like one
mean,
of the
I
biggest
don't.
creators out there. He's got a big beard.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I do. I just don't know
Okay.
the name.
Well, he's like a big deal. Everyone calls him like Hormozy style videos because he kind of popularized the like talking head with caption style. Um, but he doesn't like I'm pretty sure he has a podcast where a lot of this content gets generated from. He doesn't put in his captions like listen to my full podcast or anything like that. What he does is he just posts the content, and over time he gets people that are like, I want more from this guy. I see all his posts, like where's the full conversation? I want to see that.
Yeah,
And
and
it
you look it
gets
up
them like
yourself too.
hungry to seek it out. And
Yeah.
so just think about like as you see creators with podcasts or in B2B, like with webinars, like do you subconsciously feel more attracted to the ones that are constantly right hooking you with like, even if it's an entertaining or value add piece of content that say watch the full thing here, sign up to get the next one here, click the link to see more? Or are you subtly more attracted to the ones that drop and silently walk away and let you do that over time with enough breadcrumbs that over time you finally get to the point where you're like, I I want to be on that newsletter because I'm obviously missing some stuff. Like they obviously have something bigger going on here that these little clips are generated from, and I want to be a part of that. I think Exit 5 is a great example of that. They have a really good mix of content for content's sake and then not promoting the membership and then letting that build over time. And they do enough kind of, I think, strategic right hooking, especially nowadays as, Dave's making it more of like a legit business, that it's making it more clear that like, hey, they want you to sign up. But I think for a while now, like they've been light on that kind of stuff. So yeah, just I think it's a good exercise for us to think about as you go forward. Drop, drop, drop. Don't ask for anything and let the momentum build up. Let the desire and demand build, and then let them seek it out. So you have to have enough at bats to justify it, though.
Yeah. Well, I guess in that respect, then quantity does play a part in all of that,
You're absolutely right.
right?
Yep, you're
Because I know
absolutely right.
we talk about quality over quantity, but you got to sort of infuse the quantity in order to gain the insight, see what's working, get the momentum. Um, but yeah, you just don't want shitty quality.
There's a lot of levers there, and when we say quality, we can keep the lever of quality of idea up, and you can start to tune down the quality of production value in that case, because we're probably talking like resource strapped, maybe more startup level environments where there's not big teams and lots of stuff going on. So in order to keep that quantity level high enough to justify some of this stuff, something's got to give. Quality of idea can never give. So I think that's a really good point to end on.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, I think that should sort of bookend us on this topic of zero click content. Again, great topic. I think we could probably jam on it for even longer, but I think we made some really awesome points here, and we'll kind of end it with that one.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you guys next time on the Marketing Grind.